Ready? Okay, we're going to go ahead and start our board meeting. I want to mention we've got a couple people here. This is not Ron Mitchell. This is Kristen Blanchard, who's filling in for Ron or for John. So we're glad to have you with us. We also have Hayley Hanson with us, who will be making a presentation later on, and I think everybody else is the usual. All right.
What about Brad?
Brad Hanson, is his first meeting?
That's right. Brad is, well, I forgot. He was introduced last week, so I'm sort of used to him. Anyway, welcome, Brad.
Thank you.
And do we have any other announcements? If not, take up the minutes of our January 16th meeting and ask if there are any additions or corrections.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Anderson and a second by Mitch. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. We'll now call on our treasurer, Linda Ice, for her report.
Thank you and good afternoon. We'll look at the financial statements for the period ending January 31 of 2015. As always, we'll start with the cash graph, and you can see that the cash balance at January 31 is at $19.5 million. This is a decrease over the prior year of about $1.4 million. And I was researching some of the differences in there. And right now we do have on the books, we've got some receivables coming in for some additional expenditures on the baseball stadium and some of the construction for the FEMA. And then you will also recall that we also made a transfer on some of the cash for the FEMA project as well. So that's some of the variance there. As you can also see that the cash has obviously drastically gone up because of the January fees and financial aid that was processed and comes in at the beginning of every semester. When you move on to the statement of net position, total assets are at $146 million. Total liabilities are at $47 million, which leaves us with the total net position of $99 million. The next statement that we look at is the comparative statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. And we always look at the difference column comparing last year to this year, cumulative. Total operating revenues have an increase of $1.9 million. Total operating expenses have increased by $2.8 million. Total non-operating revenues have seen an increase of a little over $800,000, of which $400,000 of that is the performance funding dollars that we've received from the state for this year. Comparative between the 2 years, the current year shows an increase before other revenues of $10.2 million. The prior year showed an increase of $10.25 million. So the difference between that is a whopping $30,000. So we're fairly on track to where we were last year, but there's a lot of variances between revenue and expenses, but between the 2 years, we're only looking at $30,000 difference. And under the other revenues, the capital gifts, you can see that there's about $1.8 million in the current year, and of that, about $1.5 of that is for the baseball stadium funding. That concludes my report. Do you have any questions?
If there are no questions, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the report.
So moved.
Ms. Flanagan, and you made the second?
I do.
All right, thank you. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion carries. I'll now call on Mr. Rob Yust, Vice President for Business Affairs, for his report.
Thank you. We'll go over a few construction projects fairly quickly here. The baseball stadium, that facility was complete far enough for us to have games this last weekend. Successfully, I might add. We won both those games, but if you haven't been over there, you need to be over there and visit that. It's a very, very neat facility. Contractor's still working on the concession stand, the suite building, as well as the bleachers and the stairs, but we hope to be finished within a couple of months. The field house, the steel erection is finally complete, knock on wood, so they should be able to really pick up the pace on that project. They've been waiting for the steel for quite a while. It's been delayed on that. The masons have completed the exterior walls, interior walls on the first floor, and the installation of the roof has begun. So we should see some pretty good progress on that project now. The FEMA shelter, the contractor is working on the studs and sheetrock for the restrooms and utility rooms. The installation of the roof and interior fixtures have begun, and the interior painting will begin next week. Residence Hall, all 6 buildings have been framed and roofed. 2 of the buildings are scheduled to be complete on the inside, and by the end of the month, with appliances being delivered by the end of March. Transformers are set, so there's heat to all the buildings, so they should be able to do all their finish work pretty quickly now. A new item I'll tell you about is less than 2 weeks ago, we had 15 temporary lab trailers delivered to our campus. Those of you that recall the Joplin campus at the mall, they had temporary lab facilities out there to have science labs. Well, we were able to acquire those at a very, very good price, and they were delivered a couple of weeks ago. We have them behind the physical plant office, and we will be working on getting bids to set those in preparation for taking Reynolds Hall, first floor, offline for lab renovation on that floor. So it'll be a great addition to this university to have Reynolds Hall renovated, plus we get some lab facilities that we could use now and hopefully in the future for other areas when we have transitions. Finally, I would like to introduce a new employee of ours in our area. We have a new human resource director, Evan Jewsbury. He is a graduate of Missouri Southern. Is that correct, Evan?
That's correct.
He's much younger than some of us, a lot of us. So welcome, Evan.
Happy to be here.
It's amazing that he started this week, so his first 2 days he got a snow day. I'd like to figure out how you're going to get paid on that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that concludes my report.
Any questions of Mr. Yust? All right, thank you for your report, and we'll move next to our athletic director, Jared Bruggeman.
Thank you. I'll just cover 3 points. There's plenty of information that you'll have available in the packet. One is Coach Darrell Day, our football coach, has resigned his position yesterday. We had a press conference about that, to take the defensive coordinator position at Northwestern State University. He did that for personal reasons, which you can watch the video. I don't need to elaborate on that, but certainly he will be missed by our staff and certainly the student athletes. But we will begin a national search immediately, and we've already started with that process, including getting the committee formed. I wanted to mention the Pride for Pink. The Pride for Pink basketball event was held on Saturday, February 14th, so if you're at that game, there was certainly a lot of activities around that, and t-shirt sales and attention to the issue. So far, this campaign has raised over $15,000 for cancer research, so that's pretty substantial, and that's not including, even from that event, we sold jerseys. All of the jerseys sold, and minimum dollars was $100, and they could buy it now for $200, and we sold about half. People just came up and wrote $200 and took those. So anyway, I do want to let our staff, and particularly some of our coaches, the women's coaches, as far as coaches that coach the women's sports, came up with this plan for this year of how to fundraise a lot more for cancer awareness, and that's been pretty fantastic. The final thing I wanted to mention here was just regarding the baseball stadium project. We had its opening day the past weekend, and the crowd was well over 600. Not all the things were open, but it was certainly a functional stadium at that point. We had 500 commemorative tickets, and also I've given you the hat that was handed out to spectators that came in. And it's a great stadium. We appreciate Crosslink Construction, and particularly their project managers for fast tracking that to make it what it is. It's very impressive, particularly at the Division II level. So I wanted to thank them publicly, and also Bob Harrington's been a big part of making these things go. There's a lot of projects on campus, and to think that he was helping monitor that as well, it's very appreciated. So I have a lot more in the report, but that kind of concludes, since I know we have attorneys here.
Any questions of
One
Jared?
quick question, Penn State game this Saturday, tomorrow, what time is that? I thought I'd see it's got 5:30 here in the report, and the schedule says 1:30.
It's 1:30 and, yeah, that must be, it's 1:30 and 3:30.
Okay.
Baseball game still on?
The baseball games are currently in process of being rescheduled, so.
All right. No further questions. Thank you for your
Thank you.
report, and we'll move on to Dr. Brad Hanson.
That's all right. Good afternoon. First, let me say what a privilege it is to be back at my alma mater. I have received the warmest welcome that anyone can imagine, and that even includes today with the Board of Governors. So I do appreciate that. My family and I feel very, very welcome here at Missouri Southern. Proud to be here. I did provide you with a report. I'll highlight 3 areas from that report. One is spring enrollment. On the census day, the 20th day of the spring semester, we recorded 5,068 students enrolled here at Missouri Southern, and that is relatively flat. That's a decrease of 4 students from 1 year ago. But we did note that credit hour production for that same period, comparing last February with this February, was up just over 1% to 60,651 credit hours. And so that's very good. One notable element of enrollment was our international student enrollment was up 17.7%. We currently have 186 international students enrolled here at Missouri Southern. I also want to note that we do have figures for licensing revenue for this year versus last, and licensing revenue from apparel and merchandise is up 19% from the previous year. And I can say, having watched this community from afar and now being a part of the community, I see a lot more Missouri Southern apparel and merchandise in the market, and also being worn by alumni and friends of the institution. And so that's reflected in our licensing revenue figures. And finally, the Missouri Southern Foundation met 2 weeks ago, and one of their new initiatives is to incentivize the creation of new scholarship endowments. And so they identified a pool of $200,000 that can be used to match up to $10,000 per new scholarship endowment for donors that wish to set one up after April 1st. And so we're in the process of developing marketing materials for that initiative, and hope that that $10,000 potential bump to their endowment will incentivize some folks to step forward and create endowments for student scholarships.
Any questions of Dr. Hodgson?
These are matching dollars, you said?
They are matching up to $10,000 per scholarship. Yes.
Thank you for your report. We'll move on to our Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Pat Lapira.
Yeah, I'm real pleased to announce, and the very first thing on my report is that we have received provisional approval for another standalone master's degree. We're so pleased with this one, being able to offer the Master of Science in Education School Administration. I think that's going to be been a very popular one that William Woods has cashed in on for a number of years. So we're very pleased that we're going to be able to offer that. In addition to our Master of Science in Education, TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages. And then we also got approved, we currently have our Master of Science in Education curriculum instruction, but we got approved to offer that at some off-site delivery. So Nevada, McDonald County, Jane, and Webb City. So we're very happy about that. And I did have the opportunity, although Dr. Cade isn't with us and he's not doing real well, I had the privilege yesterday of telling him this, and he's very, very happy. He did the work for this, and I wanted to give him that credit. So the second thing you'll see on there is we do have History Day. Dr. Paul Tevereau, for the 25th year, will be coordinating this event, and it's quite an event. We'll have over 200 entries of students from area high schools, junior highs, middle schools, all kinds of special interest in history entries. So that's an exciting event, and that'll be March 6th. We do have a group, Dr. Marble and I, Darren Fullerton, and a few others will be heading to Chicago here shortly for the HLC conference, and as we gear up for our comprehensive evaluation, this will be very valuable for us as we prepare for that. The honors program right now is active interviewing candidates. They have over 100 applicants, and they will need to accept, 35 to 40 is all we accept annually. And if they're an applicant, they're an outstanding student. So that's always a challenge for them to determine which ones to give those scholarships to. Dr. Marble, just recently we completed, he wanted the opportunity to meet with all the department chairs. And that was challenging, but we got it done. And it gave him the opportunity to not only meet some of the chairs that he didn't know, but also to find out what is it that your department is doing, and what are you thinking of in the future? What are some of your dreams and ideas for the future? And I think it was well received, and was pleased that we had those. The other thing, I just did this yesterday, so it's not in your report, but I wanted to give you, Julie Wingert's only been with us 2 years, and we've had a remarkable increase in our dual credit, both credit hours and number of students that are participating in our dual credit program. So this nice graph here gives you a reflection of those increased numbers, and this is just as of yesterday. Again, we're up 13.97% from last year in credit hours of dual credit. So we continue to try and grow our dual credit program. Lastly, we have a couple new hires that will be beginning in August 1st, and that's Mick Gunderman. He will be in the Criminal Justice Department, and then we have Dr. Renee White, Associate Professor with our new social work degree. Retirees, Mr. Keith Robertson, who's been our Director of Clinical Field Experiences over in Teacher Ed, sets up all the student teaching, practicums, and so forth. He's been with us for quite some time, and he has given us his intention to retire June 30th. So that concludes my report. Any questions?
Well, if there are no questions, we thank you for your report, and we'll move on to Mr. Darren Fullerton, Vice President for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management.
You have a lot of information there in front of you. Pat mentioned Dr. Tevro, so I'm going to divert from my report for a minute, just kind of brag on a faculty member here. I get all the security reports, as does the president. Dr. Tevro is a longtime faculty member here on campus. He found a sizable amount of money in cash and called campus police and turned that in. So I just think many times we forget the caliber and the character of the faculty and the staff that represent this institution every day. And so since Pat had mentioned that, I wanted to throw a shout out to Paul and say thank you for what, not only that incident, but what you do every day. But, some items on the report I'll just highlight. The Counsel for the Advancement of Standards in Higher Education. You hear faculty talk about program review. That's our equivalent of program review. And our directors have been, I'm sure, taking my name in vain as they've gone through this. They've done their preliminary reviews, and we're sitting down with each director in the division, and they will have their reports finalized with any action plans that need to occur by May 1st, and will be posted on the internet for the campus to review and look at. Title IX training, since you're going to be getting that with Hayley, I thought I'd let you know that 618 faculty staff have already completed that training. And so we have a few more faculty and a few more staff, but we have the large lion's share of that as well. You did meet the new general manager for Sodexo, Esther Easter. Today was Mike Wonderly's last day. Dr. Hanson on board to talk about the foundation. We did want to remind folks the foundation scholarships are taking applications right now. Those are due March 1st, and then financial aid can help the students process those if they need assistance. And then the Dress for Success, you have a flyer attached to our report. The Alumni Association, Career Services, and the Young Professionals Network are conducting the Dress for Success. But again, this is a great partnership, an idea that originated on campus, but a great partnership with the Young Professionals Network. But then if you also look at your flyer, you'll see a list of banks on there. The bankers in town have taken this to heart, and they're actually conducting drives at their institutions for our students. The clothing, the business attire that will be collected will all come to Missouri Southern and will be distributed to any of our students that want to take part in that. Unless there are any questions, that's my report.
All right, well, thank you for your report, and we'll move on to Faculty Senate President, Dr. Michael Garoutte.
Thank you. Well, since we're all deviating from our Any remarks? I'll note that you probably see outside the window a bunch of young people, and I guess I would like to just thank Missouri Southern for supporting that kind of initiative. It's the Technology Student Association competition, and so if you had a room that you had to have rescheduled because it was full, that's why. And I happen to see my 7th grade daughter out there today who's competing in that. So.
In addition to Dr. Ruth's comments about this, we also have Business Discovery Day with admissions. So some of the areas in business had to reschedule as well to accommodate those. So great opportunity.
It's really good outreach for us. I'm also doing a really wise student tactic in repurposing a report for you that I actually wrote for a different purpose. So if you see my handout that you have, it's actually a report that I presented earlier this week. I did brave the weather and drive to Jefferson City to meet the Missouri Association of Faculty Senate's meeting. And so this report is serving a dual purpose, but it's the same sorts of issues. So we are still in the middle of our comprehensive review of the faculty handbook. This is a subset of that. And the Revision Oversight Committee has now started. We've been meeting every Tuesday since August, and starting yesterday, we're meeting Tuesdays and Thursdays because the deadline is coming closer and we really needed to get this project finished. And we missed Tuesday, so we did meet, in fact, yesterday. Our timeline, and we met with legal counsel right before this meeting, and we're continuing to do that so that we can stick to our timeline. The timeline has us presenting to the administration on March the 3rd and having something finalized March the 10th before spring break, presenting the proposed handbook the week after spring break, and getting a draft out to all faculty by April the 7th. We plan to schedule then some Q&A meetings and presentations about the handbook so that everybody can be informed about what the major changes are and secure their support for the vote. And if all goes well with that, then the faculty would vote at the all-faculty meeting on April 29th. If the administration approves, if Dr. Marble approves, then it would come to the board for the May meeting for approval. So that's what I said.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I would like to suggest that this come to the Academic Affairs Committee for discussion in a meeting before coming to the full board for final vote.
That seems good. So I'll just communicate with about when that committee is meeting, and we'll make that.
Normally, the committees would meet the morning prior to the board meeting if you think that's sufficient time, or if you think we need more time, we
I
may.
know I defer to the chair of that committee.
That would be me.
The Academic Affairs Committee was in the past was dealing with issues like.
We'll chat.
Okay, we'll chat. Perfect. Perhaps Dr. Marble will report that the task force has come up with by appropriating another institution's policy. I did thank the Missouri West. I actually met the person who wrote the policy at Jefferson City this week, and so he wrote this policy, which we mostly tweaked a little bit, but taken, and that's been approved. So we'll see where that's going to go next. We are still in the middle of searching for our replacement for Dr. Lapira upon her retirement. We have interviewed 2 candidates for that position. The 3rd candidate was scheduled to interview last week, but was delayed because of the weather. And so the earliest we could get that candidate rescheduled is Friday the 13th of March. So that's delaying us a little bit longer than we had hoped. So we have one more candidate coming in on February 27th, the final candidate on 13th of March, followed immediately by spring break. So we probably won't be able to make an offer until after spring break to get the committee together and finalize a recommendation. Dr. Merle and I will have to figure out the timeline on that, but we have already chatted about that, and it will be as soon as possible after spring break. You can read the rest of those reports. I guess the other thing that's on my report that I can mention is that the Faculty Senate through the Faculty Welfare Committee did approve a description of a domestic partner. This doesn't have any effect except for to define the term domestic partner, so that when Missouri Southern seeks bids for insurance, that it would be possible for Missouri Southern to request domestic partner benefits be included, which they currently are not in our current insurance benefits. And so that's been submitted to Dr. Lapira and the President's Counsel, and then we'll see what becomes of that. I was informed when I was in Jefferson City that Mosier's, the retirement system, has already put in language about domestic partner benefits for retirement benefits. So I'll have to get informed on that issue.
Probably going to see our HR department.
I believe that concludes my report.
Are there any questions of Dr. Garoutte? If not, we thank you for your report, and we will move on to Staff Senate President, Mr. Robert Frossard.
Thanks, sir. We began February with a early weaning training session. We had Miss Nancy Good, who's a foundation board member. She came in and spent a couple hours with us on parliamentary procedures. Just kind of a brush up. Really enjoyed her coming in, and beneficial to the whole staff senate. And we have also, through the staff welfare, have looking to submit to the President's Counsel a new, it's going to be rewrote the employee tuition waiver. That is going to try to include non-dependent children and define spouse and following kind of domestic partner situation. So we're looking to submit that to President's Counsel in the next meeting. And we've tasked our Legislative Oversight Committee to visit with Ms. Good. She's kind of looked at some of our bylaws, and some of that we can kind of clean up a little bit. So we're going to have a task our Legislative Oversight Committee to review that. And so look to have a proposal on those. And that's all I have at this time. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Are there any questions? If not, we'll move on. I see that Mr. Messer, our Student Senate President, isn't here. Do we have anybody?
No, he had a conflict at the last minute, and he wanted me to apologize. The main thing that he wanted the board to know is that they are in their full-blown campaign for St. Baldrick's. If you remember, St. Baldrick's is their philanthropy where they raise money for childhood cancer research. So they're selling everything from the shamrocks that you post downstairs with your name as a donor to bracelets. They were at the basketball game. And they are still looking for folks that want to shave their heads. And that event will be on March 25th.
That was the event where they shared Scott Cragen's head last year, right?
They did, and they
It's over $2,300.
And Dr. Cragen had part of it shaved, and then he was lobbying people in the crowd, if you want it to not look this bad, cough up some more money. So
That was fun.
he was able to secure a
Then
lot
I
of
told my daughter
funds.
she could shave off what she wants, and she took it all off.
So that was all his report.
All right, thank you very much. We'll proceed on with board committees. I believe we had do we want to defer the
I think we're good to go.
budget? Okay, we did have a budget committee meeting.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Budget and Audit Committee met this morning at 11 o'clock. I'd like to thank the governors for attending that. I'd also like to thank the staff for some very insightful presentations. The primary purpose of the meeting was to set tuition for fiscal year 2016. And the committee did pass two proposals that I would like to read. The first proposal says to authorize the administration to set the in-state and Lion Pride tuition rate at $177.03 for FY 2016. This reflects an increase of $1.79. The second proposal is to authorize the administration to set the out-of-state tuition rate at $354.06 for fiscal year 2016. This reflects an increase of $1.06. I'd also like to point that will set that out-of-state tuition at 200% of the in-state tuition. So on behalf of the committee, I would like to make a motion that we accept the two proposals as read.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. McCumber. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Anderson is seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion is approved. Is there anything further?
No, sir, that's all.
Thank you. At this time, we'll call on Dr. Alan Marble, our president, for his report.
Thank you. Governor Fleischaker, appreciate that. You do have a report in your packet. I'll be as brief as I can be, which sometimes is not that brief. But I do apologize again for missing the January meeting, as I did the year before. But I point out in the report that that's going to happen year after year because the NCAA conventions at the same time. So you might consider, at least in January, moving to the fourth Friday, if that's okay. You just give some thought. Otherwise, we don't have a meeting in December. I missed January, and that's sort of a 3-month gap. So governors might give that some thought for the future. Last month, I know that we failed. I did, and along with Dr. LaPierre, to get the sabbaticals on the list for the board to see, because we approved those so early in the year, which is something we might think about for the handbook. We were finished with all that work in November, so it kind of just slipped our minds that Dr. Vicki Rutger and Dr. William Huffman had applied and gone through the committee and administrative approval processes for sabbaticals, and one in the fall of 2015, the other in the spring of 2016. And so I bring that to your attention and just point out really how beneficial we think the sabbaticals are for our faculty to be able to learn new teaching strategies, recharge their batteries, and learn about emerging technologies and sort of cutting edge research to bring back to campus, because that's what they're required to do. And also to think about when we turn the corner financially, which we're starting to do with the great game, put some money back in professional development, because it's very important for our faculty to be able to stay current and to bring back the best they can for our students. Another highlight of last month was Martin Luther King Day. I don't know if you spoke about that last month at all, but it was a great day on campus, the Martin Luther King Day of Service, a celebration. We had over 300 community members join us for breakfast that day. I think Faustina Abrahams deserves a tip of the hat because she coordinated everything for us. But we heard just a fabulous presentation from Kelly Schoenbauer Sales. It was just very, terrifically inspiring. She works for the drug court here in Jasper County. Just did a fabulous job. I think another highlight last month was working with NutriBlend and being able to help them present $80,000 in donations that they raised, actually, to area backpack programs where they feed children who are food challenged, they call it, for the weekends. Mike Osborne, who's one of our alums, is the president and CEO of NutriBlend, and he has a passion for helping feed children that need it, and wanted to share in some of the sharing some of that joy with us. So we were able to serve as a fiscal agent. Thank you, Linda, and the folks here on campus who did that. And then we were able to help distribute those checks. I won't go into the department chair piece because Dr. LaPierre spoke of that, but it was really terrific to sit down with the department chairs and hear what's on their mind and what they see for the future. And it's just very exciting for our students. I think that we just couldn't be better served by that group. So I won't go into that too much. One piece that I did want to focus on just a second in the report was the testimony that I gave and others gave to the House Higher Education Appropriations Committee in early February. Because it was in the newspaper, so you probably read about it, but the point of my talk was that this combination of shrinking state appropriations and only being and limited tuition increases to CPI, which this year amounted to $1.79. No one's more sympathetic to keeping tuition low for students than me. I come from a community college background, so you know that. But it's a real squeeze on this university in particular. And that combination of shrinking state appropriations and tuition being squeezed has resulted in Missouri Southern having the lowest combined revenue per student of any university in the state. Any public university in the state, I should say. And that makes it very difficult to serve our great students the way we need to serve them. So I think that going forward, we should be prepared to make that fact known to people and to keep lobbying to have something change to where we can serve our students the way we need to serve them. Also, on the legislative side, Senate Concurrent Resolution 9 has a 5.2 million and a little extra in there for Reynolds Hall renovation. That's something we've been working on here. My goodness, I've watched that list go in for 15 years. It's been on there, I think, or many years. I don't know, Rob, you can correct it, but it looks like that has a very good chance. It flew through the Senate to the House side to be considered. The governor was here on campus, you know, and toured Reynolds Hall. He'll certainly sign it. So we're very hopeful that that's going to happen. The great game of education is rolling along just terrifically. Jeff Gibson and Scott Cragen are doing a good job of putting that together. Some of us will be going to some high-impact training planning this month to start the next phase, which will be sort of the strategic planning piece of the great game. Right now we have people working on putting the scoreboard together. We have people doing mini games across campus. And I think it's going to really result in something great for us as we go forward. Obviously, the biggest, greatest task we're undertaking now, Dr. Garoutte spoke to, is the hiring of a Vice President of Academic Affairs and Provost. We've had, as you said, 2 candidates on campus. One was delayed by weather. We'll have that wrapped up, I think, by the 13th, our interviews, and probably the week after spring break, we'll have a recommendation. I would be surprised if we don't hit the target date. We wanted to hit mid-March, we might be just a little beyond that, so we're in good shape here, I think. So with that, I think that's a little truncated report, but we're trying to be brief because Hayley's going to take plenty of your time with Title IX later. If you have any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them.
I'd just like to suggest that when we schedule our meetings for next year, that Sharon, you might schedule the January meeting for the 4th instead of the 3rd Friday of the month. Wait to take action on that till we get closer to that date, but at least that'll kind of keep that in mind, so we hopefully can have Dr. Marble present.
And Jared.
And Jared. Yeah, I guess we want him to. At any rate, and on the question of sabbaticals, I think that might be something we might want to address at a future meeting to put a schedule. I'm thinking that the board doesn't necessarily need to approve individual sabbaticals, but we might want to put a limit on the number that could be approved without board action. But we can put that on the agenda for a future meeting. Does anybody have any other comments or questions?
Just that the report is not in our packet.
You don't have it?
I don't. Did you get a copy of his report? No, I think we're copying it. He referenced that, but it's not.
You can email it after the board meeting, but I think we'll copy it.
It was a secret report.
Okay. We'll ask that copies be sent out.
I was the old.
There you go. Okay.
Pass it around.
Pass it
All
around.
right.
We're saving paper, pass it around. I'm sorry, I don't know. Sorry.
Okay, are there any additional comments or questions? If not, we thank you for your report and we'll move on. Is there any old business? If there's no old business, we'll take up new business. And I have on the agenda here consideration of a resolution for delegation of authority. I believe that you all, every member of the board has received a proposed resolution from Mr. Yust and Hayley, Hanson, and at this point, I don't know if we need to have a formal presentation of the resolution, or if you just want to, if we have questions about it, how you want to handle that. Bob?
We were going to seize the opportunity, since Hayley was going to be here for Title IX training anyway, that we're going to tap you as much as we can here. So we sent the resolution out for input from the board, and we received some, and we will continue to receive input. If you have any issues or concerns or questions, if we want to discuss them now, we can with Hayley here. Otherwise, we can receive those over the course of the next week or two and then bring that forward at the next board meeting for a formal vote, if you'd like to do that.
I think one of the questions that I received from some of the board members is the amount. I know we reduced the original resolution from 250,000 to 100,000. I'm just wondering about what amounts generally would be necessary for anybody other than the president to have authority to sign. I might want to have some input on that discussion as to why we need that much authority for anybody. I don't know if Hayley wants to address that now, or if you want to
Well,
wait.
Hush Blackwell has done a lot of these types of resolutions for various universities and colleges, and that was a recommendation. And we agreed with that. And Hayley, if you want to talk a little bit about that, that's fine.
It has come from our experience in working with other institutions. We actually went back through the board's bylaws and looked at the kind of blanket delegation that's within the bylaws, which I think is in Article 6, that discusses the powers and duties of the board president to sign agreements. And we're trying to put some context regarding how those agreements would be signed and for which agreements would need to come to the board. And so the $100,000 seemed to be a threshold, as long as it was within, as the introduction to the resolution talks about, it must be within the approved budget that has already been approved by this board. So all these expenditures have to be within that budget. If there's things that are going to be expenses outside the budget, it would go through a different process than this resolution, which I think is the purpose of that introductory language. And I think there may be a need to make it a little bit even, we want to make it as crystal clear as possible that it's that this has already come before the board through the budgeting process. But then there would be some authority of the president to sign up to a certain amount. And some institutions, other public institutions in the state of Missouri that we've worked at, have set that threshold at $250,000. They felt comfortable with that from their finance and audit committee meetings. It's really up to the institution to set that threshold where you feel comfortable with in terms of what that means for the president in terms of reviewing contracts, and what that means for the delegation that the president will do to others that may sign as well. I think the concern that we had in working with the institution is to make sure that we knew where all those contracts were coming from, and that whoever was signing contracts on behalf of the university had the authority to sign those contracts. And that's why we thought giving some, scope around signing these contracts would be helpful. Other institutions, I know one institution is at 250, another institution decided 200 was their magic number. There's no real magic around it. It was the number of contracts that the president wanted to come across his or her desk at that particular institution. The other thing we've done with Mr. Yust is create a checklist for contracts to make sure that we're contracting, have the consistent language within the contracts, so whoever is signing them knows that there's consistency for the university and that we're not obligating the university to things that we don't want to be obligating the university to do. So that gives you a little bit of background about why those thresholds were chosen, but again, it's totally within the board's discretion to set those.
Any of the other board members, Mr. McCumber?
Yes. I know one of the questions I had when I contacted Rob, and I think he contacted you, was that dollar amount. When it was originally $250,000, and I suggested maybe $100,000 would be better, because as I understand it, and as you very well explained, this is merely for the execution of what the board has already approved.
Correct.
And so it just gives some clarity as to what those steps are and sets those dollar limits in there. And so I'm much more comfortable with the $100,000 level than I was with the $250,000, merely for size.
Any of the other board members have any questions or comments?
My other concern was on the specificity of to whom could this authority be delegated? How far, how broadly across campus would this go? And this doesn't really address that. It says that essentially the President's Council has the authority to delegate to people who report to them. And I know in the past, I know in the past we've had concerns campus-wide that contracts were being signed at multitudes of levels and without there being a central clearing place for that.
Yeah. As an example, it states in here that the Vice President of Business Affairs has authority to sign within these parameters, but then if I say that I would like to have Linda sign for us, that I would have to have a delegation of authority from me with her that Dr. Marble approves, so that he's comfortable with Linda signing it. It doesn't allow every person on the campus the authority, blanket authority to sign on behalf of the university. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. I just wanted to state as well that in your bylaws, it states right now that the authority can be delegated to any vice president, dean, or anyone that the president deems appropriate. And so we're trying to be consistent and walk through the process that Rob described, that the president would, again, deem that appropriate through a written document in terms of what types of contracts would be able to be signed by someone other than Rob or
Vice President.
Yeah, the vice president.
And then does this also cover that there would be a central repository for all those contracts?
It is in the last sentence of the resolution that how the contracts will be maintained. I think that is still, it's an excellent question, and I think it's still one that we want to get additional clarity around about how contracts, what type of, if we're going to have a software system. Some institutions have decided to have a software system in which they will track the expiration and the contract terms of, is there, for instance, an automatic renewal provision that we need to notify the other party by a certain period of time or the contract will renew. We're, I think, still hammering out how we're best going to work. Right now, it's a little bit more of a siloed, whoever's signing the contract is responsible for their own contracts. But I believe that your question goes at the next step to this. We've addressed it in the resolution, but you're exactly right. We want to get to a point where we have a central repository.
We worked on that this year where we tried to get everything funneled through my office so that Connie can take care of it. As you can imagine, it's a little bit of a challenge. This will at least say that I have to be a co-signer on a lot of these contracts. With me being a co-signer, at least I have it in my possession. I can take a copy of it at that point. But it's not as fine-tuned as we need it to be, like Hayley mentioned.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? So do we want to defer action until our next meeting, or do you want to?
That's entirely up to the board. If you want to still think about it, we can sure wait, and we can run them past Hush Blackwell if you like, or whatever y'all want.
Well, I agree with Mitch's suggestion about lowering that figure to 100,000. I think it's prudent to. The main thing is just to corral the process to better control.
The resolution that was submitted was amended to say 100,000, and I think there was a couple of things like the change in the designation of who could do it. But if you're satisfied with that, those changes, then the chair would entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
Well, I entertain to give that motion. Everybody's satisfied with that.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Anderson and a second by Mr. McCumber to go ahead and approve the resolution for delegation of authority. Is there any further discussion? All those on the board in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The motion is approved. We have another matter. I believe Dr. Lapira had a motion or something on academic policy she wanted to present.
It was just one, you had one submission. It had to do with a change in requirements for our Bachelor of BAS degree, so it was pretty clear cut. We just made a little change to it.
Okay, would anybody like to make a motion to approve that change?
I'll make that.
We have a motion, and do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Flanagan. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The motion is approved. We have discussed briefly in the past having a board retreat. We haven't really discussed details, but I'm thinking that we might want to try to have a retreat in April, and I'm thinking that maybe rather than trying to do as we've done in the past, have it go Friday and Saturday, that we try to start early on Friday and hopefully get through it in one day. I'm open to suggestions or proposals. I do know that Dr. Marble has suggested 3 areas that we might want to take up. One would be SWOT analysis. Sometimes something as simple as listing strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats will help clarify where we currently find ourselves and suggest strategies to move ahead. You mentioned environmental scanning, taking a few minutes to really look around the area, state, county, and globe to see if we can detect trends that will impact the institution in the foreseeable future, positive and negative. This would be forecasting in the vernacular of the great game and help identify emerging opportunities and potential pitfalls. He's also suggested strategic positioning and repositioning, assessment of how we are equipped to deal with a rapidly changing future and where we can best utilize our scarce resources most effectively to distinguish ourselves in the higher education marketplace. We've also may have some other thoughts of things that we could take up.
That's 2 days, that's 2 days right there.
Knowing you're gonna read that, I would have been a little more careful.
Well, I think these are all areas.
Clumsy writing there.
Well, I think these are all areas that really merit consideration. I know we've spoken about the great game and taking that up and so forth. I guess what I really need to find out is if we were to try to schedule this, would everybody be interested in trying to, say, start on a Friday morning and go through? Okay. Our April meeting is scheduled for April the 17th. I don't know whether, is everybody here? Would that be a date that we might try to do this?
I think that would be a wonderful day. That's one that already is sandwiched on the calendar, so that would be.
All right, well, unless anybody is negative on that, then I'll work with Dr. Marl and Sharon to see about scheduling that. And again, if there are other people that have ideas that they want to present, feel free to submit those, hopefully sooner rather than later, so that we can put together an agenda and take those up.
Rod said that'll take 2 days.
Well,
we can start at 6 in the morning.
well, I guess there's always a possibility of continuing it on a later date if we don't get it all under in one day, but we'll work on that.
Mr. Chairman, it's your idea then that we'll also have the board meeting that day.
Well, I was thinking we would have a board meeting, probably have a session in the morning, have our board meeting in the usual time, and then continue with the retreat.
Break, yeah.
We could do it that way. All right, well, we'll work on that and plan on April the 17th being a retreat as well as a board meeting. Okay, at this point, I have on the agenda a report from Mr. Yust on the Prairie Land update.
Probably have to have the front row move to this, Sherry, move this.
Put some chairs there.
Now that I know what that means.
Yeah, so which one?
We're gonna entertain you for a little bit.
For those of you that do not know, Missouri Southern owns a piece of prairie land. So we're going to give you a little insight of the prairie land. What I'd like to do is introduce a lot of folks back here that you haven't seen in a while. So one that you probably never have seen is Randy Haas. He is a private land conservationist with the Missouri Department of Conservation. Bob Harrington you see all the time. Jason Willen? He's an assistant professor with the Department of Biology and Environmental Health. Dr. Teresa Bowman is also an assistant professor with the Department of Biology and Environmental Health. And finally, Dr. Kip Heth. There you are. He is an associate professor with the Department of Biology and Environmental Health. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a history of what's going on with the university here. We own a piece of prairie land. This is at an intersection of Newman and Duquesne Road. You can see Duquesne, Newman Road. We own this tract here. It's on the northeast corner of campus. This is the area that we do own within the red, within the red square, we own that property. Yes, you can see. You'll see right over here, this is College Heights. They asked us, how many years ago? I don't know, a long time ago, if they could pay for a parking lot on our property that they could use for their church. And we allowed that to happen. So this parking lot is in fact ours, paid for by College Heights, so we can use this anytime. They use it all the time for church services, so that's within our property. This little corner right up here is owned by the Roman Catholics. Their intent at some point in time, I think, was to put a Newman building on that site. They visited with Dr. Marble at one point, and I'm not sure if that's going to get any traction. But, we don't own that. People think we own it, but we do not own that. So that area in the black that you see, this whole area here, is what we're going to refer to. This is an area that we have visited with the folks I just introduced, and we're talking about this whole area here, according to them, and they're the experts, this is all prairie land, native prairie. So we were thinking, okay, we need to work out some type of arrangement where we always keep this as prairie. For as long as we can think in the future, this is going to be prairie land, we're going to designate that. Our intent at some point in time is to do something down here. This is a rendering back, those of you that were around many years ago when we had the possibility of a medical school coming on our campus. This is the possibility where they were going to look at, one of the possibilities. There's two. Well, this was one area they were looking at. This facility, we had an architect just slap a building as a rendering to say, okay, what would it look like? Just for your benefit, that is a 40,000 square foot, one floor building. So obviously if you take that and you go up, you could add on, 80,000 square foot, whatever, 2 floor, whatever you want to do. But this is just for conversation. Our intention at some point in time is to have some type of a research part, possibly, maybe partner with some schools, university, maybe University of Missouri would like to come down and pay for a building that we can jointly use. There's all kinds of possibilities. It's a great location, but the intent is to preserve this area so that we do not ever build on that. We have plenty of land here to build on. Little roundabout there that people love roundabouts, so we can build all around it. This little area right there, everybody keeps asking, why in the world do you all have to jot that? Well, there's a culvert right there, a little gully, and it's a low spot, and probably the biology folks who talk way better than me, but that's probably not suitable to build anyway, so why not just go ahead and let y'all just do what you need to do with the biology. So with that, great. Jason, there we go.
All right, thank you. So this piece of property in the corner there, this piece of prairie that we have is actually very unique to not only the state of Missouri, but Midwest in particular. Historically, prairie made up a good chunk of land that we would see in the Midwest. Today, we've lost a lot of what we see on the map there. This is historically the range of tallgrass prairie, Missouri. Today, tallgrass prairie is pretty much these little postage, what we call little postage stamps in the landscape. So if you can imagine taking about 95% of what you see in dark there and basically kind of turning them into little dots, that basically would represent what is actually left on the landscape today. So what we have here on the campus is not only unique to Missouri, but really to any university in the United States. We have a piece of land and a habitat that is very rare today. And we call this remnant prairie because we believe that it has never been plowed. And we look at these little mounds out on the prairie that are called Mima mounds. And these are historically created by rodent activity after the last ice age. And typically, you know that the landscape has been plowed because you will see no evidence of these mounds. So typically, when farmers go out to plow, they basically level the landscape. So this is just some little bit of evidence, again, that this is a remnant tract that's never been worked over. Also, typically in the spring, we'll see these little rings out there in the fields that appear to be the work of bison in the past. So what we call these little wallows or these little disturbances that they would make. Now, being a grassland that it is, it has an abundance of different plants that we have found up there. So we have recorded over 170 species of plants. And some of these that I have pictured here are actually what we call indicators of remnant or high quality prairie. And so these would be species that you would not see in a system that has been degraded in any form in the past. So species like, the royal catchfly here, the downy gentian, or the ground plum milkvetch are going to be species that we would say are very conservative. So in addition to this vast array of different plant life, we have an abundance of birds that call this home or simply kind of pass through in the wintertime. During the nesting season, we have numerous sparrow species. We have the dick sisal, the meadowlark, Bell's vireo, which is a fairly endangered bird. This very brightly colored species here, the painted bunting, and the bobwhite quail. And in addition to these normal or regular nesting bird species, we get several visitors in the wintertime, so things like the Savannah and LeConte's sparrow, the common snipe, Smith's longspur, and the short-eared owl. So as previously mentioned, kind of a breakdown of proposed use of the property here, we would continue to use this section here as research. So this would be put aside for research, this would be put aside for educational purposes, basically maintained as native prairie. And up until the point of possible development on the prairie, we would be also maintaining this 23 or so acres here as native prairie as well. So we have basically this whole 40 acres up until the point of development, we would be kind of managing it, monitoring it as regular prairie. Now there is also an additional 10 acre tract of prairie just west of the softball fields, baseball fields. And this is primarily used for the cross-country team, and you can kind of see here the track around it. And this is currently not being managed and really used for any other purpose. So we intend to also manage this as the other 40 acre tract.
I added it.
I added it, okay.
I added that one.
Jason, that shows where it is.
So here, so if you just kind of step out from that, so here's that 10 acre tract, and
Right to the right of that.
Southeast quarter is the 10 acres.
yeah,
Right to the right of that.
yeah.
One over, one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right there.
Yeah, all right.
Right there.
All right. Okay. So here is that tract as we kind of zoom out from that, so you can kind of see it's west of east. I'm sorry, of the ball fields. So, in addition to managing this as native prairie and preserving it as prairie, we have several other uses or purposes that we propose for this tract of land. So currently, we use it as an outdoor classroom. Several professors in the Department of Biology and Environmental Health use the prairie for labs and for classroom purposes. We currently use it for courses such as mammalogy, entomology, taxonomy of flowering plants, aquatic ecology, and in environmental health, there is a soils course that actually has a pit out there where they do work as well. I also want to mention that being a large tract of land that it is and is high quality, it is conveniently located on campus. So while there are plenty of natural areas to go off campus and take students to see, we don't, with this prairie here, we can just simply take them across the street and really show them a good representative of this habitat type without really even having to travel very far at all.
They love it.
They do. So some of the previous uses as far as professional research has gone, Drs. Messick and Zoshinsky in the Department of Biology have conducted various mammal surveys and mammal studies, and Dr. Heth has and continues to monitor aquatic invertebrates in our small wetland we have on the prairie. And the Missouri Department of Conservation and the Missouri Native Plant Society have done several vegetation surveys as well. So those numbers that I gave you have been provided by their work on the prairie. In the future, we are looking to do more observational studies, and we have several students who are interested in doing individual research projects. We'll be setting up permanent vegetation monitoring plots. And one of the areas that we're doing is kind of an outreach and kind of coordinate with the Missouri Department of Conservation is collecting seeds from these rare plants that I have pointed out and basically kind of doing a swap or a donation with them. In the area, there are a lot of prairie restorations that have either been done or ongoing, and they lack a lot of the seed from these species that I've mentioned. So when they establish new prairies, they're very low in diversity, and they pretty much really look just like they're dominated by grasses. So you don't get a lot of this diversity that I previously showed. Now, we also want to reach out to the community. So we want to not only reach out to other departments in the university, we want to reach out to K through 12 programs and through other members in the community. As far as other departments on campus, we'd like to reach out to departments such as the English. We feel like if the students were to visit this prairie, this would inspire work for poetry or short stories and so forth. The art department for painting or for photography. We feel like this nice landscape would benefit them as well. As far as K through 12 programs, we have several professors in the department who are willing to assist students and teachers with field trips or with outdoor laboratories. So we'd like to make this or offer this to them as well as kind of an outdoor laboratory or an outdoor classroom. There is a trail around the prairie, and this is maintained for the cross-country team. So there is a trail that can be used for walking, a trail that can be used for those who are interested in bird watching or for their own purposes such as photography. And we propose, as far as management goes, since we are somewhat limited by what historically kind of maintained the structure of this prairie, such as bison and fire, in the meantime, it has been managed through mowing. And what we propose is, in the future, kind of an alternating of mowing, either east or west on the prairie. And by doing this, this will leave enough cover for those nesting birds that I had showed, and also for their winter visitors. So this will give enough time for the vegetation to kind of recover each year, and at the same time act as kind of like a natural disturbance would have to the prairie historically. So, in the absence of these natural disturbances that I've mentioned, bison and fire, you tend to get a lot of woody vegetation and these invasive species that you probably do not want. And if they're not controlled, you can have this conversion from a nice high quality prairie or a nice high quality system in general to one that's going to become degraded and dominated by species that you don't want there. So some of these non-native vegetative species that we have kind of starting to get established are things like Japanese honeysuckle, Bradford pear, which are very common horticultural species that people buy at the store, but they inevitably escape and get into natural systems. Now we also have native woody vegetation that we like in small amounts, but without a lot of management will get out of hand. So things like cedars and sassafras are species that can convert this into more of a woodland habitat instead of a prairie. Now we would leave some of these species in place because these act as good nesting areas for some of these bird species. And currently the biology club manages trash pickup, so they go out once a semester and basically bring in a nice haul of any windblown trash on the prairie. So while that's not so much a hindrance to the animal life there, it's kind of an eyesore. So again, looking at this from an aesthetic value, we do like to keep the trash pickup. And with that, I will take any questions you might have.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
The photograph that you showed of the 40-acre tract seemed to show the southeast corner of that over by the church had been disturbed or changed, or is there a draw through there, or is that still actually native prairie?
That has been, they had to put in a retention pond when they put the parking lot in, so some of that has been modified in that corner.
Okay. 40 acres more or less. At some point, a prairie area that you're trying to conserve, does it become too small for you to save it, to conserve it, to preserve it? Is there some critical mass of ground that you need to keep in order to make it work? Or can it become too small?
Typically,
I'll address that question. As an example, the Missouri Prairie Foundation is doing a restoration project over here between 15th and 20th, just off Murphy Boulevard, as part of the, it's called the NARDA Fund, NARDA Restoration, Natural Resource Damage Assessment Funds. The EPA has gone and done some cleanup. So now the Department of Natural Resources, in conjunction with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, is putting some money back into doing restorations or doing easements or doing mitigations for some of the ground lost due to mining and stuff. So one of the sites we're doing is a little site there, about 8 acres or so. We had a gentleman come in by the name of Mike Arduzer who did an insect collection with bees, basically pollinators, and he found almost 30 different species of bees using this little small, I mean it's not even an acre size of remnant, and I use that term loosely. It's just a few species of forbs that are on site, but there was like 30 different species of bees using them, pollinators, and several of them were very conservative. So, and even our agency in the past history has gone through and said, well, if it's not at least 20 or 40 acres, it's probably going to be insignificant. Well, I think going through and after Mike did his little research project with the bee species there, I think you really can't have an area that's too small. It's probably still going to be significant in some way, shape, or form. And what you have to keep in mind is the native prairie like you've got out here is very, very diverse. And some of them, the really, really good ones, can have over 500 different species of plants on them. And so when you're looking at a parcel of ground that has that diversity in it, even though it's small, it still has a lot of importance. It potentially can have a lot of importance. And I think there's probably more that we don't understand, and we're just waiting to find out. So I don't think you can really look at a site and say it's too small to be insignificant. So that's my 2 cents.
What is the ground to the north of this 40 acres? From the photograph, it looks to be very similar. Is any of that prairie to the north of what we own?
It's under Acme Land Company, I think it's,
We have talked to those owners, and we will continue to talk to those owners to see if they would be willing to donate possibly some piece of that land for this venture. We know that if at some point in time that we need to get up to that land, we probably will need to put an easement on the east side of the property all the way up, you know, kind of between us and the church, all the way up to be able to access that. But we are still in conversations with that landowner.
How much ground up there north is prairie?
almost 700 acres.
A lot.
Wow.
It's not nearly the high quality that this little patch is,
It's
but
not.
it's good. But it's not like this 40 acres. You can just look at it and drive out and see it, tell the difference.
Thank you.
A question, you mentioned that mowing in lieu of fire, which is a natural occurrence on native prairie, but do you have any plans if fire should start either through carelessness or lightning or something like that?
We approached, I coached a school a couple of years ago and asked about fire, and I worked with the Joplin Fire Department, was kind of working that way, getting an approved fire plan on it, burn plan on it, and actually conducting a prescribed burn on the site and stuff. And then kind of got sidetracked, and I think now it's probably not going to be much of an option, or any option at all. So, I'm a pyromaniac. I've been doing burnings for 35 years or more, and I see the importance of it as a management tool. But you have to understand that being in an urban area or surrounded by homes, businesses, and roads and stuff, that you really have to be careful about fire. And as another point, on that little site down there on 15th and 20th, we did a little prescribed burn there a couple of weeks ago, just some acres. So what we did, in conjunction with the fire department, we had an approved burn plan there on site. We did it with very specific wind conditions. Went all fine, no issues, no problems. So, in lieu of not being able to do the fire, we have to do what we can to try and do some disturbance there. And haying is basically the only option we have. So, but if we can do it in conjunction with the resting part of it, haying part of it, you're diversifying that structure. The woodies are always going to be encroaching on stuff. You always have to battle those.
Anybody else have any questions?
Well, they mentioned the 10 acres, that's just going to be used. It's not going to be designated permanent. There's no permanence to it, right?
Correct, but there is no intentions from the university at this time to do any expansion in that area in the very near future. So the intent is to go ahead and use that as another tract of land for the biology club to be utilized.
But not a permanence like what you're setting up at 14 acres.
Correct. You see, we have a good relationship with the Missouri Department of Conservation. Randy's going to go out and find this humongous grant that's going to give us a boatload of money. He told me that yesterday, so.
I'm already on some already.
Sweet, I like that. So hopefully we talked about getting a wood chipper, you know, to keep on our campus so we can take some of this. You cut down how many?
I cut 60 down last week.
60
class.
Cedars?
Cedars.
Yeah.
And so they've already done that. I know that Randy has gone out and identified trees, is that correct, for Bob's area to go and take down? The question is, we probably need to have something how to dispose of those things. We don't want to put a big burn pile set up in the middle of campus somewhere. But anyway, if Randy's successful in getting some money from a grant that he's already started on, that'd be great. Any other questions? Great.
Kip, there's someone back there, can you identify what we have in?
Oh, these are just a few of the native grasses. Some of them are quite beautiful. Put a Dr. Marvel's face to do a loose stem. I think it's the prettiest grass in the U.S. Anyway, it's our floral arrangement for today.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I know we have one major item left on the agenda, but before we take up the...
Before they, can we be clear, we're setting that aside officially. Does that mean action from the board? I think it would be appropriate to have action, that parcel be set aside from now on, if you don't mind. Someone
I would like to make that motion. I think this is a wonderful thing that we're finally making something official about at least part of that land.
Okay, we have a motion to clarify that we're setting aside the one little acreage that's up at the northern part on a
14.45.
I'll second.
We have a second by Mr. McCumber. My only question before we take that up is can we bind future boards as far as action when we say that this is permanent? Do we have any way of really making it permanent? I think it would always be up to the university in the future. But
hope you can.
Well,
I think that would probably be a little document needs to be drawn or something.
well, I don't know if it, I mean, like I say, we could pass the resolution.
I think it would take another action of the board, though, to do it, so.
Well, it would take an action
To reverse it,
Yeah.
as much effort. I might have picketers outside. Me, but, I guess you put it in trust, I don't know, something like that. But the land is actually the state's land, I guess, so technically.
Do you have an opinion on this?
I don't immediately have an opinion,
Okay,
but I can
great.
think one.
Well, at least the best we could do today is to
I appreciate the compromise that has been through the work of all agents involved here. That is a.
It's been a great collaboration
Yeah,
between the
it
Missouri
really
Department,
has.
the academics and us. It's worked very well. And this is a very workable solution, I think, from all parties, and it fit well with our plans as well at this time.
Well, you know, if this is the only one university in the country, we ought to do all we can to keep it, right?
And keep in mind that what I've mentioned them, and we've already talked about this previously when we had discussions about when the medical school was thinking about coming here, and we had discussions with architects, and when we design whatever facility that we are going to put in if we ever put one, or whenever that happens, that we will work with all groups back here, the Missouri Department of Conservation, the biology group, to make sure that when we start construction and all the planning, that we protect and preserve as much as that we possibly can, incorporate that into the design, because there are ways to do that. Is that correct? Yeah, there are ways to do that. And we would want to entertain that and see what can we do to, even the piece that we are developing, to maintain as much of that as possible and incorporate that into it, because I think it'd be kind of neat.
Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Well, I'm probably going to vote for the motion, Mr. Chairman, but I've been here for a number of years, and I'm kind of at the point now that I find it so unique that were it up to me, I'd keep it all prairie.
Well, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Well, at the very least, you have the opinion of the current board that they want to keep it permanent. You'll have to deal with whoever takes our place in the future, but hopefully they'll share the same ideas. Thank you. Okay, do we have any other new business before we Title IX?
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Mr. Bruggeman, who's in conversation with for the lovely Lions hat. I would note that before the meeting today, I had an opportunity to peruse some of the books in the Missouri bookstore, or the University bookstore. I always like to cruise through there and see what students are reading, and I note that they have a number of different pairs of socks in several different styles, green and gold. And some of those patterns is very Dr. Seussian. I would encourage anyone that got a hat today to go find a pair of socks to go with their hat. I would point out that the socks are in the front door to the left, right next to the shot glasses.
You purchased one of each.
All right, we appreciate that. Is there any other new business before we take a brief break before taking up the Title IX training? If not, we'll take, what, about a 5-minute break and recess, and then we will resume.
You might point out, those of you who are at the table have seen this, those need to come back.
Do we have a margin?
Oh, we do have one.